What kind of area do you want to explore next in this conversation? Do you want to talk about your spring course?
Yeah, that would be fun.
Okay.
Now, it wasn't this last spring, which was 86, but it was 85. So in December of 84, we organized this course, and it was going to be an experimental course and not a usual kind of course, but it was entitled Improving Quality and Productivity in Organizations. We got co-sponsorship for the course from the Statistics Department, the Business School, and the Industrial Engineering Department. And there were students from all three of those disciplines involved. There were about 45 students in all that we got. Some of them were undergraduates, a few of those. Then there were graduate students from those programs. Then there were people from industries around Madison and farther afield. There was one fellow, Bob Burns, from Procter & Gamble, who drove from Green Bay down every week. Of course, met from, I think, nominally from 7 to 9:30, but it would go longer than that. And there were some auditors who sat in from local businesses and so on. So it was quite a mixed group. And my goal was very simple, to tell them everything I knew about quality and productivity improvement. But beyond that, to have them learn as much as they could. That was the most important part. And what they ended up learning was a lot more than I ever knew at the beginning or the end or any other time. I mean, various groups went off in different directions because the whole course was organized around projects. And so they gathered themselves into groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 people to study a particular project. And these projects would be live projects. I mean, they would be in a bank or in industry, one of the industries, or in city government. Many different kinds of projects. And they had a project proposal, and I looked at all of those. They were fascinating projects. I mean, there was a canning operation. I think it was in Oconomowoc, or maybe the plant was actually in Poinet, but they put labels on cans for people. They had peas and various other vegetables in this big warehouse, and then if some company wanted to buy them and market them under their label, then they would send the order in, and then they would do so many cases for some manufacturer, and they would have to be sure to get on the right label onto the right cans, of course. And get the P label on the P label, and get the, the Libby's or whoever they were on the Libby cans and that kind of thing. But there were all kinds of things in that operation to kind of make it work better that they were working on. That was improving the quality. So that's how the course was structured, and basically we followed the projects. So naturally, since there were different projects, there were different kinds of interests that were stimulated, and they would go off and read and so on. And I said that if they wanted to write me memos every week, that would be nice, and I would try to respond to them. But I had 45 people reporting to me, which is not really the way businesses or any other kind of thing should be organized. I mean, it was just too much. If I did it again, I think there would be more reporting through the teams. But at any rate, I spent virtually the whole semester, and this was now, the spring semester 85 from January to May. I just spent full time on that course. And a lot of it was spent with these memos that they would write to me. I said, you're not going to get them back. I mean, in business, you don't send off memos and get them back. But I would respond to the memos, and if they wanted to keep copies, they could keep copies of the memos they sent to me, and then I would try to respond. And it was just amazing the kind of memos I got, because some of them went sort of off. They got into things that didn't have anything directly to do with the course, just quite extraordinary things. But at any rate, one of the things that I did in December right before then, it was right around, well, it may have actually been in January. Peter Scholtes here gave me some materials on andragogy. Now, he studied with Malcolm Knowles, and I guess Malcolm Knowles coin this word?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and what it has to do with, well, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, here I go.
It's your take.
Yeah,
you had Deming born in the wrong state, so I'll let you do what you want.
Deming was born in
Iowa,
so that's a correction.
raised in Wyoming.
Well, another thing I should mention.
This
always have to
is
bring
the
this
errata.
Is this thing. One thing I mentioned to say and didn't say is the statistics for experimenters is that there are three authors. I mean, Box and George Box and myself and Stu Hunter, and one thing I didn't realize till a few years after the book was published, that I was an author of this book, a co-author of this book, and I studied from it as an undergraduate. So, I mean, I don't think there are many people who study from a book as an undergraduate and end up being a co-author, but anyhow, that was just, I meant to put that in before. But anyhow, okay, now to get back to andragogy and Malcolm Knowles. I guess, the way I think of it anyway, is that andragogy is can be contrasted to pedagogy, and pedagogy being the kind of methods that might be suitable to second and third graders and so on, where you really can make a case for the fact that the teacher has this information about what's going to go on in third grade, and the students are blotter paper or whatever, and then the teacher puts it out in an orderly fashion and step by step, and the students learn it that way, and you have to have discipline and so on, and there's all this, the source of all the knowledge and everything is a teacher, and then the teacher transmits this, in a very real sense, down to the students, and there are many things that go along with that. I mean, the teacher is in control of what's going to be taught and how it's going to be taught and what kind of modules, and the teacher is in control of all this. Now, andragogy, by contrast, is a style, and Malcolm Knowles was interested in continuing education. So, continuing education means you've already had some education, and sort of adult education is where you run into this. And he found that this pedagogy kind of approach just didn't work as well as another sort of approach, which would be like the teacher meets the students on more an equal basis. And in fact, it's, in a sense, teacher and students is not really the right kind of words to use even. But the students have a lot to say about what they want to learn and how the instruction should go on. And they should do a lot of the learning themselves. And the teacher, if you will, is to serve more as a facilitator and be available to help these adults really learn what the adults want to learn, and sort of help them, have a perspective on what they're doing, and just help them along in what they want to do. And they want to apply things. It's not like sitting in third grade and learning, things about writing words or whatever, saying someday you will find this very useful. And the adults want to go out and try it and use it and sort of reinforce what they're learning and that kind of thing. And it's much more immediate. Well, as I was reading through these notes, I thought there was a table, but I've gone back and tried to find this table and I can't find it. So maybe it's in there. or maybe I just made it myself and had pedagogy at the top of one column and andragogy at the top of the other column. And then there were all these different kind of things going from top to bottom. And they had to do with different aspects of this, like the role of the teacher being either the all-powerful person who has all the knowledge and is transmitting it to the learners, and that would be in pedagogy, whereas in the andragogy it would be more like the teacher is more a facilitator and helps the learners learn what they want to learn, and it would be like the curriculum or the subject matter or what they were going to learn. That was, on the one hand, with pedagogy determined by the teacher completely, and with andragogy it was really the learners had a lot more to say about this. I mean, there may be some going back and forth with this teacher, facilitator person, or this coach, this leader, about mapping out what would be a good program and what would work, that kind of thing. And various things of that kind. But then when I got finished with that, I thought, looking at the list under andragogy, I thought, well, what I've listed under there is pretty close to the kind of management style we wanted to talk about in this course, with the teacher being replaced by the boss and the students being replaced by the workers, sort of labor management or something, or management and labor. And so then I thought, yeah, it's very similar. It's very similar. I mean, this new management style for quality and productivity improvement would, I envision this manager as being a facilitator and talking to the people, doing different things from what the manager had done before, as far as what the manager's job is. I mean, it's not to be authoritarian and say, you do this, this, and this, and then the workers go out and do this, this, and this, and very authoritarian kind of atmosphere. But rather, the workers would have a lot to say about figuring out what the problems were in the organization, what things should be done to improve quality, and that they would bring this to the attention of the manager, and they would talk about it, or that as they got into the whole system more, that the workers would figure out which problems they could solve and which problems management had to help them with, and that they would be given the freedom to go and solve problems and do things, and they would take more pride in what they did, and they would be more involved in the whole job. So it was very similar, this new management kind of approach and this andragogy. Then I looked at it some more and I thought, no, it's not just pretty similar, it's exact. I mean, it's almost exact. I mean, it's closer than just close. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. So this is about, I don't know, a couple weeks before the course is going to start, and I thought, well, I really should teach this course, not the way all the other courses seem to be taught around the university and all the other courses I've ever been involved in, which are based on pedagogy kind of things, that we would actually try this andragogy kind of thing. And that furthermore, that what I would do is model what I thought a good manager would do. So my job for the semester was to model what a manager would do with the troops. So I didn't tell them that at the beginning. I told them that at the last lecture. That's what I'm trying to do. I just didn't want to get too self-conscious and all this stuff. But at any rate, that's what we kind of did. And so that meant I had to write up I did want to write up some things for the first lecture about what the course was about. And the goal was for them to learn as much as they could about quality and productivity improvement and techniques that could be useful and sort of philosophies that were interesting and that were current. And so people read books. They read books by Deming. They read books by Duran. They read Crosby. They studied them. They compared them. They argued about them. And they saw a lot of videotapes. We showed some of them in class. Some of them were over in the library. People would write me little memos about, boy, this is a good article, and I really liked it, and all this, and I'd look at it, and I'd say, yeah, this is a good article, and I'd tell the rest of the class about it, and then some of the other class would read it. And then there was responding to all their ideas about what they were doing on their projects, and what they were reading about, and what they didn't understand, and so on. One of the things that happened was that Dr. Deming's book kept going through improvement, and various versions would keep arriving in Madison.
You're talking about his new book, the one that's
book.
just coming out now.
Right. Now it's called Out of the Crisis.
This was in galley stages back when you were having your course.
And in fact, the week before, he said he was sending this thing to us. And I said, well, what I was wondering about was whether we could make it available to the students in this class so that they could go through and read it, and more specifically than that I would assign 2 students to each chapter to really go through and see, find mistakes and that kind of thing, or comments or whatever they wanted to tell me about the book. And then I got an answer late the afternoon of the first class that was going to meet that night, and Deming, Dr. Deming had called up and said, sure, go ahead and do that. So then I was able to go to class that night and say, okay, your first assignment is that, let's just count off 1 through 18 or whatever it is, the chapters in the book, and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we started again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and through, and I said, okay, everybody, the 2 people who had 1s, then you have chapter 1, and then 2 people had 2s, you have chapter 2, and so on. And your assignment is to go read that chapter in this book, and tell me all the mistakes you find, and typographical errors and all that, or things that you think are not clear and things like that. So there they were, from day one, at least getting into Dr. Deming's new book, and then we compiled all these and sent them off to Dr. Deming. And
did you get any reaction from Dr. Deming?
Oh yeah, he was just very grateful and said thanks to everybody and wrote a nice letter, which I made a copy of and gave to everybody in the class, so they all had this letter from Dr. Deming about, how they had helped him, with this effort of putting out this Out of the Crisis book. So, but then the students wanted to read about Duran, and they wanted to read about Crosby and everything, and they just took off and read about those guys. But we would discuss Deming's book and his philosophy and other people's philosophy. We watched videotapes of Bill Conway when he talked to the Ford people when they visited. Bill Conway was at that point Chief Executive Officer and President and Chairman of the Board of Nashua Corporation. And he had an informal talk with some people from Ford, and then that tape was taken back to Ford, and it was influential. It was one of the factors that got Ford Motor Company interested in this whole quality and productivity improvement effort that they've been on for a number of years. From everything I've heard, they're sort of the leader as far as commitment goes, and as far as commitment from the top of the company. And the president of Ford at that point, somewhere around in there, made a speech in which he said that he wanted to become a disciple of Deming. And, quality is job one, has been in their advertisements. Well, apparently it really is something they've been spreading around Ford, which is an enormous task, because there's so many people who work at Ford. So they've put a lot of money into this and so on. So we got to see Conway, talking to the Ford group and some other groups, and the projects at the end of the course were just, I mean, they were just sort of flabbergasting to me. I mean, just the students just did tremendous work. I mean, one group with the canning company, they produced a report that was, I guess, that thick. I mean, it was a huge thing, and it had beautiful pictures in about the whole process and about what they tried. And they tried different ways of putting the glue onto the labels and whether they would clean it. Clean the machines once a shift or 3 times a shift or whatever and reapply the glue. And they were doing design experiments. I didn't know they were doing design experiments out there until I read their report. And it's just excellent work that they were doing, and excellent work that a lot of people were doing. In the bank, they had some forms and procedures that had a lot of errors in them, and they just, month by month, it just went down and down and down, all these errors. And until they got to a stable system, and then they just had to change the system. And they were about at that stage when the course ended. They sort of bottomed out at this, steady level, and they really had to do something about changing the system. There was nothing more that workers were going to be able to do with the system that they did have. Anyway, they were really beautiful reports in the end. And these memos were they were very stimulating for me to read and respond to. And there were, a number of people in that class who, who decided to go into this whole area of quality and productivity improvement. I mean, there were 2 individuals who came out of the course and said, we're going to set up a consulting company. So then they did that. That was Jane O'Neill and Carol Wallen. And there was Mary Zimmerman from the Madison General Hospital, and now she has a new position for her at the hospital where she spends, I think it's like 50% of her time on this sort of thing. And Bob Burns from Green Bay, I sort of lost track of him, but he went to another company where he was going to be able to do a lot more of this kind of thing. I don't know whether that's worked out exactly that way. And there were certainly other people who continued to work in this area, but I think there were a couple other ones who made, what might be called career decisions to shift into this whole area. They did that. Now, one of the highlights in that course was that one of the people who works in industry, and I don't know whether I should get into this now, who said about it in the 4th lecture. He says, this all sounds fine, Professor Hunter. It's all very logical, and it seems like it should work and everything else, but I've worked in industry, and I know it won't work. I said, why not? He says, well, people are going to have to change the way they think about coming to work, and the way they do their jobs, and the way they think about themselves in relation to their jobs, and all that. And he says, this seems to require the workers to care about what they're doing, to contribute ideas, to get involved, to be enthusiastic, and to try to make things work better and to improve productivity. And they're not going to do that. I mean, they're sort of imprisoned from the time they come to work till they go home, and it's when they leave work that they get to live and enjoy themselves. Going to work is just getting a paycheck. And they're very hostile towards management, and it's simply not going to work. And then I said, okay, well, wait till next time. Should I go into this next time? Or should we cut that off and go to something else?
Well, I think you ought to get into the next time.
Okay.
You're going to be talking about Joe and Terry, and there's so many ways of approaching the Joe and Terry show.
Right. Okay.
At least you can touch on it. Why don't you talk about it with regard to the class, and then we can talk about Joe and Terry later on with regard to the Deming Seminar.
Okay. The Joe and Terry is Joe Turner, who's foreman of the First Street Garage, or it's really the motor equipment division of the, Public Works Department in the city of Madison, and Terry Holmes, who's president of the union to which the mechanics belong, and it's affiliated with AFL-CIO. And these are the two main characters, because we had gotten started a project, sort of a demonstration project, I guess you could call it. Anyway, it was a case. It was a project started in the First Street Garage, which for the city of Madison maintains and fixes their most of their vehicles, the garbage trucks, the police cars, and so on. Not the buses or the fire department's vehicles, but virtually everybody else. They have 700 and some vehicles, I think. Well, they had gotten started on quality and productivity improvement efforts that did involve the mechanics and did involve trying to improve productivity and make things work better in that garage. And so these two guys were really on the front line, and they had worked on some of the very early projects having to do with getting a preventive maintenance program back into the garage and so on. But they came into class next time. I asked them whether they could come the next week in the evening, and they did. And I just said, well, just talk about, what you've been doing down there and what happened and that kind of thing. So they told their story about how they get introduced to these kind of ideas, these statistical approaches to quality improvement, plus the business of working in teams with their fellow workers and so on. And it was the first time they had gone out of the garage to make any presentations. And they said that to the class. They said, we're not public speakers or anything. We're comic relief, is what they said they were. So they were so eloquent. I mean, it was just, I thought it was the best thing out of the whole semester myself, because they basically said that they were involved in the work they were doing and in these quality and productivity improvement efforts. And they had seen some results, and they were proud of them, and they were proud of the work they were able to do now, whereas before they were just hemmed in with all kinds of procedures and red tape and all kinds of bad stuff in the system that didn't allow them to really get involved and really contribute their ideas and really work at making improvements. So the whole thing from their personal point of view was that it did let them and other people in the garage take pride in what they were doing, and management had listened. I mean, the mayor had listened and provided support, and other people were paying attention to what they were doing, and they liked this kind of attention. But mainly they were producing results, and I could see how if they proceeded in this way, they could keep improving what was going on in that garage. And there was a lot of good humor in the class that evening, and a lot of laughing and everything else. And I think if the people were listening in that class, they seemed to be listening, that they really got the idea that this really could happen. I mean, here are these two guys up there who were just like any other workers before, but they got a chance to really contribute ideas and to get involved and to really work on some of these kind of projects. And they challenged management too. They said, if you really believe in this, the way things seem to be going is pretty good, but what about this? We should work on this. Why don't we solve that problem? And it had to do with rusty fuel cells or filters, and why they would get rusty, nobody knew. But anyway, the manager told, set up a team of 3 of these guys, and they went out and they basically solved the problem, so they don't have that problem anymore. Water was getting into the fuel tank, and they discovered how and why, and they fixed it. And, that was it. But that was a workers' initiative. So, in terms of the class got an insight into Number one, it's logical that it should work in places because everything just seems to point that way. And you can make nice logical arguments why it should, but then the student had said, well, he'd been in industry, and it may be logical that it should work, and workers should get involved in everything else. But there were problems, and there were some problems that were quite logical to state and understand, too. Like if you improve productivity and you only need 3 workers instead of 5, what do you do with the other 2? You fire them, or what? There had to be some kind of commitments made that they weren't going to fire people because workers aren't going to work to improve, to make those kind of improvements so they can get fired or their buddies can get fired. So with the 2 extra people, they can work on more projects and improve things and get even more efficient. So, there are things like that. But the student did say that his primary message, as I heard it, was that it makes sense in this university classroom, and it seems mainly logical and it should work, but he just knew it wouldn't work in industry. It just wouldn't, and because you have to make too many changes and things. And then to have these guys actually come in and be present and answer questions, and they were quite candid about what problems they still had. Everything hadn't been solved. But that's what happened in the class, and I think they did get an idea that, this jolly well could happen. All right, now I'd just like to say a few words by way of summing up this experience with the course. I thought, well, from my point of view, it was a huge success. I learned a lot, and I had the sense that the students learned a lot, and mainly in terms of just the things they actually did and the way they were talking at the end. They had learned quite a bit from this experience, and especially the whole approach being one based on andragogy instead of the usual pedagogy kind of thing. Most of them like that. But the undergraduates didn't like it. They would have liked to have the course be just like all the other courses they had taken. They kept asking for homework. There wasn't any homework. They asked about exams, and they wanted more structure in the whole course. Because as we kept following these projects, we'd go here, and then we'd go here, and the integration, in a very real sense, I tried to help with integrating all this stuff that kept flying around, because there was also statistical methods that were talked about, and the statistics students helped as consultants on these projects. And it was because of that they got into those design experiments at the canning factory, and they got into a number of things in a number of different places. But, if someone who's looking at this from the outside or from the ceiling or whatever, and watching what was going on, it did go in many directions at some fairly high rates and lots of energy at various times. And unless the students were really integrated in their own mind as to what was going on, what they wanted out of the course, they could have been uncomfortable. And I think that's what happened with the undergraduates. There was just too much of a responsibility that I was handing over to them that they just didn't want to have. And they would have more reassurance and more, things like tests and homework and tell us what to do and we'll do it, that kind of thing. So, but the other people seemed to really like it. They said what they wanted to do, and we agreed on what they had mapped out for themselves for this semester was a good thing. And I'm sure what went on for a number of people was that they weren't going to try to keep up with all this stuff that was sort of flying all around, but that they would pick out the stuff that they were really interested in, and they would listen when some visiting speakers came in. And the visiting speakers were a big part of what made the whole thing go. We had Bill Golomsky and George Box and Peter Scholtes and Brian Joyner and Lonnie Weiss and Joe Turner and Terry Holmes and other people. We had a lot of people come in. So I was delighted with the way the whole thing went, and I would recommend that statisticians, if they're going to teach a course on quality control, or better yet, quality improvement, that they not go get one of these books off the shelf about quality control. Although, in recent years there have been there's some good ones coming out now. But to not go in that direction, but rather to put together a course that would be somewhat like this one, or at least use some of these ideas in a course that they would use. Projects and this whole approach with andragogy and just various other things that we tried in the course, because they did work. They did work very well, and I liked the way the grades came out. I don't like to grade courses anyway, but I knew more about those students and what they were capable of doing than I would have done by any series of tests or anything else. Because the people who were really involved in the class, they would write me memos, long memos, every week about what they were reading and studying and learning and what was going on with their projects and so on. And I would respond, and they would respond, and so on. And also their projects, they were another bit of evidence, and there was just lots of evidence about, and also what they would talk to me about, and so on. But I told them in the beginning that I wasn't going to, I don't know whether statisticians or other people who might try some of these ideas can get away with this, but anyway, one of the questions that may have come from one of these undergraduates or somebody else, I don't know, at the first lecture, if you can call them lectures, the first meeting of the course was, how are we going to get grades in here if you don't give us tests and homework and all that? And I said, well, I'll give you my San Francisco test. And my San Francisco test was that I imagine at the end of the course that someone from San Francisco calls up and they have some organization they're concerned with. It may be a corner gas station, it may be Standard Oil, California, it may be some public agency, it could be anything, some organization, and they want some help in improving quality and productivity. And they wonder if there's somebody I can send them out to help. And so I call the particular student up and I say, okay, tomorrow, you can go out to San Francisco and you can work for this summer on this project in this organization. They want some help, consulting help and various things having to do with quality and productivity improvement. And so, why don't you pack and everything, and I'll take you to the airport tomorrow. And so I pick them up and they're packed and I take them to the airport. They're given a ticket by this organization and they go out and they're boarding the plane, and as they disappear from sight onto the plane, I have this feeling in my stomach, and that's the grade they get. If I think that person is just going to help that organization out there a lot, I'm confident that things will go well and it'll be better at the end of the summer for the organization than it is right now. Then the person gets an A, and if I have some doubts or whatever, or if I know the student will do just fine if they only ask the right kind of questions, then it's kind of a B, and if the person may do more harm than good, then that's a C. And that's basically how I'm going to give the grades, and that's it. And so nobody quit. At that point, and so that's how we give out the grades, and that seemed to work. That seemed to work quite well. And I had done that once before in a course, and believe it or not, when I was actually grading the final exams, I got a call from someone in San Francisco who said they wanted a student for the summer, and I couldn't. It was a nonlinear design of experiments course, and I couldn't come up with anybody then. It was too short notice. But then, believe it or not, it happened again with this course. At the end of the semester, somebody did call up from San Francisco. In the first case, it was Standard Oil, California. In the second case, it was ROLM, R-O-L-M. And they wanted someone to come out and help with various things having to do with quality and productivity improvement. And they wondered if anybody was available for the summer. And lo and behold, I did find somebody this time, Steve Zarniak, who went out there. And he ended up doing things that were helpful to the corporation out there. They appreciated what he did. He learned a lot. And he's a statistician, and he virtually did nothing out there that comes out of any of these quality control books. I mean, statistical quality control. He didn't do that. I mean, he was leading nominal groups. He was facilitating team building and getting groups together, working on projects and problem solving, and using very, very simple statistics like Pareto diagrams, and using ideas out of Ishikawa's book on basic quality control and so on. So he went out and did good work, but it was in a different kind of direction from the content of our statistical quality control courses. So, and just to wrap it all up, my experience with that course is very positive. Most of the students seem to react very positively to the whole experience, and I would really encourage other people to think about some of these different ways of teaching such a course. End of summary.
I was trying to stop it and it won't stop.